is temple iconography. Is the screen visible to Murali and others? Oh.
Yes, it's visible. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Got it. Now, a few preliminary remarks to be made. Kambar, the great poet who wrote Kambaramayana, called Ramavataram, he begins his grand work, magnum opus, with describing his plight. He says, very small verse, but the meaning is this. We all know how a cat relishes milk, what all mischief it makes to have one small glass of milk, comes into the kitchen, does so many mischievous things, and finally gets the milk. He says that it so happened that a cat once strayed and came face to face with an ocean of milk. And it was thinking, I will drink it all up. He says, how foolish this is for a cat to think that it can consume an ocean of milk. Even though it has the enthusiasm, even though it has the taste for the milk, it is ridiculous to think that it can drink an ocean of milk. It will only drown in it. He says, similarly is my condition, Kambar's condition, who has embarked on this journey to describe the glory of the Lord as if my puny efforts, through my puny efforts and limited understanding, I'll be able to write everything about the Lord. When a student takes up a subject like this, temple iconography or any such deep subjects, I think that's how each student feels. In the front of an ocean of milk, wanting to drink, but also realizing the ridiculousness of trying to comprehend millenniums of culture, heritage, symbolism, occult symbolism, and its different variants spread across such grand geography through different climes and times with such profound representations through architecture. Trying to think that you can understand it all, and what is more foolish, that you will be able to say anything meaningfully in a half an hour talk. But nevertheless, subject has been taken and something has to be said. So we'll have to make an attempt. The other thing is that this is only a student's perspective. Nobody needs to take the burden of accepting this as the right interpretation of what is there as temple iconography, right? Recording. So nobody needs to accept it. All that is being done is some sources have been referred to, and our own understanding is made to bear upon the subject, and some incoherent ideas here and there are collated, and the student tries to express it through the course of the talk. That's all is there. No, there's no compulsion on anybody's part to accept anything that is being said. The third point is that occult symbolism is a universal science. What we find in temple architecture and do a specialized study of it to understand it can be equally done for ancient Druzes and their places of worship. or the Egyptian pyramids, or the Taoist places of their shrines, right? The Greeks and their architecture. Wherever we go, the great sages have always represented grand truths through geometry and architecture. Among various other means and other branches that they have used to represent truth and codify it for posterity. Right? So what is being done here is in context of Hindu temples, especially the South Indian temples that we come across, some of them, and not even scratching of the surface, right? A same student in the West can do it about the South American pyramids and yield the same truths which the masters have tried to represent. Where do temple architecture come from? Where do temple worship itself come from? That is the question. Formation of temples and construction of temples. Firstly, there is a corpus of literature called as Agama Shastras, which are not the same as Nigamas. Nigamas means the Vedic corpus, right? In usual parlance, we, while speaking, we say Agama Nigama or Nigama Agama, but they are actually two distinct bodies of knowledge, we may say, or two distinct traditions as far as the student understands. Much of what has been collated in the talk comes from a series of writings by one Srinivas Rao, who has derived his understanding from that great scholar, Vidyalankara S.K. Ramchandra Rao. 12 volumes only on Agama Shastra. He was an enigma for our generation. He was a psychologist, worked in Nimans. He knew many languages, Sanskrit, Pali, probably Greek and Latin also, and a painter, sculptor. You name anything, he was that. Musician. Writings, plays in Sanskrit and Pali. So he has written 12 volumes of Agama Shastras, collated in different, each volume dealing with a specialized aspect of Agama Shastra. So a sort of collation from that is done by Srinivas Rao, and a series of writings he has made, which has been referred to in the course of this talk. Now, the difference between Agamas and Nigamas, or Vedic corpus, and what is called as Agama Shastras, right? Vedic was not temple worship. What is said there, probably in Ramchandra Rao's works also, is Vedic was a yagna-based system where fire was the central, so to say, the central focal point. They would perform yagnas, magical performances, and they would not identify God with any murti. There were pratimas here and there, and mainly icons which were used, such as noose, lotus, umbrella, feet, so on and so forth. There are so many symbols which were used in the Vedic corpus. But Agamas is a separate system which was dealing more with symbology, iconography, and would focus more on the puja aspect, what we call as puja, in contrast to the yagna aspect. The Vedic was a public, so to say, public ceremonies. Agamas were mainly tantric and private. Agamas used symbols geometrical complex symbols, yantras, certain rituals and performances and mudras, all part of Tantra, and their mantramic pronunciations were entirely different from the mantras of Vedas. They used mantra systems different from the Vedic system. Of course, when we say Agama, here we are referring to the earliest ones. Later on, Agamas themselves sort of were co-opted into the Vedic corpus and became one of the Shadangas, right? Shadangas, later addition. And as a part of their tantric practices and mudras and rituals and ceremonies, they incorporated Vedic mantras and they got, so to say, sort of impressive authority because of this kind of confluence of the tantric and the Vedic. So the types of agamas, as usual in India, everything is Shakta, Shaiva and Vaishnava. Agamas themselves also seem to have developed in Shakta, which seems to be the sort of original tantric practices, and Shaiva, which has two branches, one in the south, one in the north. South being the Shaiva Siddhanta, north being the Pratyabhigna of Kashmir Shaivism, each having its own branches, sub-branches, its own peculiarities. As usual in India, it begins with one and quickly becomes manifold. Agamas also have become that. Vaishnavas have their two systems were called Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra. Pancharatra is the one which Madhvas use today, it seems. Called it comes from a work called Tantrasara, which Madhvas have used, which was critiqued by Shankaracharya. So they have Vaishnava Archana Vidhi, for example, a text. And this Vaikhanasa, just to give some background, is highly puritanical compared to the later Pancharatra system, which Pancharatra system seems to have been adopted probably by everybody, not just Madhavas today, but everybody. Vaikhanasa focuses only on Vishnu. They don't even allow entry of Vasudeva, Narayana and all. Highly puritanical. But the Pancharatra, allows Aniruddha, Purushottama, Adokshaja, all of them are given place and respected. And they have their own ways of construction of temple, their own ways of rituals of puja, and so on and so forth. It's an ocean in itself. Okay? There are texts which deal with construction of temples, such as Marichi Samhita or Vimana Rachana Kalpa. In Vimana Rachana Kalpa, there is something interesting. Chapter 70 deals with how to bury an idol when there are invasions. This was written in 10th century. Many of the invasions happened in 14th century. 14th century onwards. Right? So in 10th century itself, this verse comes. Bhaya rakshartham nishkriti. When there is fear from robbers, enemies, invasions by opponent kings, disturbance in village, in order to protect the Kautuka, Snapana, Utsava, Balibera and metal images, they should be hidden. And how to construct the pit in which the idol is to be hidden, where should it face, what should be the materials used, rituals to be performed, what day should be done, how it should be done. Purely ceremonial sort of performances, instructions are there in this Vimana Rachana Kalpa and many other texts. So the Agama Shastras have four categories: Jnanapada, Yogapada, Kriyapada and Charyapada. Gnana Yoga, we know, knowledge, putting knowledge into practice. Kriyapada is where the temple construction comes into picture. Kriyapada refers to many things For example, what material should be used? How should it be garnered? What part of the temple should be constructed with what material? What kind of place is suitable? And in what kind of place, what pattern of temple must be built? In the minutest detail that you can think of is mentioned in Kriyapada regarding construction of temple. It deals mainly with three things: Murti, that is the idol, construction of the idol, Panchalohas, how should it be built, what should be done, what day it should be built, practically all the details. Sthala, where should the temple be built, and Tirtha, which is the water body, which is a very important part of the temple system, right? It is said that the Nalvar, that is the four Shaivite saints who were kind of contemporaries to Alvars, right? Alvars were Vaishnavite Bhakti movements. There were 63 renowned saints in the Shaivite system, contemporaries to the Alvars, called as Nayanmars or Nayanars, means the hounds of Shiva. Hound is a particular breed of dog, or a type of dog, which has a peculiar, intense. Dogs themselves have olfactory senses which are very acute. They are far more acute. They can catch a scent and go to the object. So probably they were meaning that these 63 saints, give them whatever you want, they will catch the scent of Shiva and reach him. Whatever circumstance of life, whatever literature, whatever you give. So the Nalvar of the 63, four are highly revered, who are Appar, Sundarar, Gnana Sambandar, and Manikya Vachagar, right? It seems these four saints embodied in their life and became the perfect epitome of these four padas. One of them, Gnanapada, Manikya Vachagar. His life itself was a symbol of Gnanapada. Yogapada by Gnanasambandar. Sundarar described Kriyapada, and Appar by Charyapada. Charyapada means how should the rituals be performed? What are the rituals to be performed? What are the techniques to be performed? Right? This is where the temple worship comes from. Temple worship seems to be a confluence of the purely tantric agamic and the Vedic, a sort of not a compromise, that's a bad word, a sort of a peculiar composition made of these two streams of knowledge, fusion, has resulted in temple worship. What it has become today and all, we will not go into that. That's an entirely different subject altogether. But it began like this, that the common man who is not part of the yagna system, which the Vedas prescribe, he needs to have something to express his nobler sentiments, his focus his mind on something other than his selfish self. And therefore, you come up with these four padas and construction of the temples and congregation. It becomes not only the temple then becomes not only a means for a person to sort of be closer to something which is sattvic, but becomes a social thing also. There is the sacred and the social. The temple itself, the architecture itself, we will see further, catered to the needs of the social needs of the village, the vicinity, the public, and the sacred needs of the individual, right? So all this was taken into consideration as a part of the temple system. The temple construction itself is so mathematical. Every part of it is very fractal, so to say. That is a small part, but that part is a whole in itself. You take any part of the temple, it is entirety in itself. So parts reflecting the whole, parts being the whole, as one of the scholars says. Every part of the temple reflects the whole. Every part of the temple is the whole itself. Just as in the human body, every cell is part of the whole, mirrors the whole, is the whole in itself, right? So there are various rules. Most simple temple is a man standing, and if he sits down and whatever activities he needs to do, that space is 1 by 1 or 1 unit by 1 unit. Now you expand that 1 square, 2 square, 3 square, 4 square, and in that mandala you place Purusha. So it becomes Vastu Purusha Mandala. You take mandala of squares of number and place Purusha. That is, the temple itself is Purusha, a representation of architectural representation of either the heavenly man or the terrestrial man also. Even the human body is reflected in the temple. So the Purusha is sitting here. There are various parts of it. There are various deities which are assigned to these various squares, probably indicating that if you construct the temple in the most magically precise form, with the materials that are need to be used in the right sthala, and install the murti with the tirtha, and all the elements are in harmony, the different elements that are the different devas that are mentioned are active in those different squares, right? So you can invoke those demigods, so to say, and make them available to the needs of the public. So that was how temple was envisioned, as we can understand. This is another diagram that we can find how, we'll not go into the detail, how you can take a deity, that is a murti, or you can take the temple itself. The temple itself corresponds in each of its aspects to the parts of the deity or parts of the murti. So take any part of the temple, it represents the whole, right? So we can go to this later and do a detailed study if needed. No, this is interesting, right? There are different parts of the temple. We all have visited temples, so we don't need any introduction to it. See, there is the stamba. Then there is this thing called Bali Pedam, whatever, something, Bali something that comes here. Then there is Mantapam. Remember this, there is a Mantapam here. And here, after the Mantapam, where all the social activities take place, gathering of the people takes place, Kalyanotsava takes place, and marriages takes place, right? All those activities take place. This happens in Mantapam. There is something called Antarala, which is closer to Garbhagudi, but after Mantapam, right? And then there is Garbhagudi. In the Garbhagudi, there is Murti, right? And then comes the Shikara itself, the Vimana, the Gopura, the Shikara, and the Torana, the bracket, and all these representations as part of the temple. If you look at it from the top, you enter the temple from here through the steps, or there is one more Gopuram here. There is Mantapam for social activities. You circumambulate the temple, enter through Mantapam, go to Antarala, that is, or Ardha Mantapam, then enter Garbhagudi if you are allowed inside, right? So this, remember this, because this is a beautiful representation of how the soul itself progresses. The evolution of the soul through repeated incarnations, repeated cycles of incarnations, finally finding its own self to be the universal self, right? That is represented here as far as this student can understand, right? Look at this now. This same diagram that we saw here in the previous, this one on the right side, is, in the Agama Shastras, divided into these different padas, right? This outermost pada corresponds to the outer wall of the temple. It's called Paishachika Pada. The path of circumambulatory, where we go and do Pradakshina or Parikrama, is called as Manushya Pada. Where the Mantapam is built is where the Devika Pada begins. Brahmapada, Garbhagudi, and the dot in the center is where the Murti is. Right? And then there are these various Soma, Aditi, Ishanya. There are these gods representing probably the different hierarchies of intelligences which can be invoked and made available if the temple is rightly constructed, or if the right temple is rightly constructed, they represent these forces as a diagram of the cosmos itself. The diagram of the cosmos itself. The beauty of it is, look at this. Parikrama, or what is called as Pradakshina, right? This is where we do Pradakshina. We begin here, always go left and take this path. We never do Apradakshina, right? We never go from right to the left. Look at the beauty of this. When we are circumambulating the temple, the outer wall is always to our left. Outer wall is Paishachika Pada. Lower elemental, destructive, demoniacal representation. It is to our left. And always to our right is the Murti. The soul also progresses between good and evil in the same manner. The Paishachika Pada is also within us, our karmic mind, lower elemental tendencies. And in the depth of our consciousness is spirit. And man circumambulating is called as Pradakshina, meaning to the right. Dakshina is right, Vama is left. Always be to the right. Right? If you don't do Pradakshina and deviate, you get absorbed more and more into the outer wall, go out of the vicinity of the temple, become a lost soul. Your personal consciousness has so far deviated from its parent source that there is a snap. And the Antashkarana is the bridge between our higher mind and the lower personal mind is destroyed. You will get absorbed eventually into the Paishachika elements, elemental kingdom. Right? Which means the personal consciousness is completely lost. Right? Isn't this beautiful? I mean, look at just taking circumambulatory, you find this whole thing represented. And you circle, whatever. 1 circles, 3 circles, 5 circles, 7 circles, Pradakshina. And then you enter Mantapa. Repeated incarnations, choosing between good and evil, good and evil, good and evil. You always choose right. Eventually you will enter the precincts of the temple, the prakaram of the temple. You deviate, you take the left path, you can get lost. And Purusharthas, all the 4 Purusharthas are mentioned here. In the temple walls, you will find certain, sometimes erotic images mentioned, depicted, sculptures made. You don't understand how is it that in a divine place you have these things. That is because the human ego, in its experience, is experiencing all these things before entering the presence of the temple, before entering the prakara, inner prakara, right? So that is another representation that we can remember. So the Purusharthas are mentioned, the Purusharthas are symbolized in the temple. The Murti or the Pratima or the Bimba, or where the sanctum sanctorum, Garbhagudi has a murti. That's where moksha is. Dharma is the next antarala. And artha mandala. And you go to the outer parts of the temple, then it's kama. So from one to the other, the temple is representing how man has to take the right path and proceed to the heart of the temple. What is the heart of the temple? We will come to that. Now, Makara and Tirtha. Makara and Tirtha, we may not have much time. Tirtha, the water. Yeah, Tirtha is fundamental part of temple. Either there is a artificially created water body, which we call Kalyani, or the temple itself is constructed at the banks of a water body, right? The beauty of it is it serves so many purposes. 2 or 3 is what we can understand. One is there is this representation between water and land. There is land, the sthala, and tirtha, water. And we know through the study of symbology that the human ego is amphibian in its nature, quote unquote, amphibian. Resides in water, comes out of water also. Makara represents that. Makara, the mythological, it's actually somewhat loosely represented as an alligator, crocodile, but it's a peculiar alligator. It's not a normal crocodile, sort of mythological, mythical, and that represents the human ego. It is there after death in devachanic state, subjective, wisdom, and it is there on earth also. That is between life and death, right? When it takes rebirth, it is on earth. When it gives up body, it goes to that state. So it is doing the cycle like a pendulum swinging between terrestrial and supra-terrestrial spheres. It is swinging between these two. And every day and night, 24-hour cycle also, it does the same thing. We, in our waking consciousness, the Christ within us is crucified. It is torturous for our inner self, what we call as pleasures and enjoyment and, acquisition and this kind of desire. Torturous for our inner ego. It is tortured as a prisoner. When this personal karmic consciousness subsides as a part of sleep, the inner ego is released and he goes to his own sphere. So in a 24-hour cycle, he traverses like an amphibian between the inner subjective, outer objective. Makara represents that. How beautifully the temple Tirtha also represents that. Temple Tirtha also has another magical sort of magnetic purpose where it is said in Isis Unveiled that such was the magical knowledge of the ancient true Purohits that the mass of the people who would come to the temple, their deleterious magnetism, so to say, their sin is absorbed by the deity. The temple, in the Garbhagudi, the idol which has been installed with such magical properties, magnetic properties, it absorbs the magnetism of the common man, the deleterious magnetism of the common man. To that extent gives him relief, accumulates in itself the foul magnetism, and every day or every third day or whatever be the frequency, the priest takes the idol and takes it to the greatest purifier on this earth, which is water. He immerses it in water, mantramically re-energizes the idol, which has the so to say, recharges the idol, washes off and dissipates the foul magnetism back to the elemental kingdom and reinstalls it, pratishte, magnetism and electricity, right? Reinstalls the temple for next lot of people to come and Abhishekam. Yeah, look at that. In the rituals that are followed in the temple, all the Panchabhutas are represented, corresponding to Pancha Granendriyas, right? There is fire in the Arati. There is incense, nose. There is water that is used, the prasadam that is given, right? Fragrant flowers that are used. All these are representative in its highest sense, and to some extent the common man also feels certain kind of beatitude and certain kind of a probably some kind of a solace in the midst of his the kind of oppressive life that they all have, some kind of a relief. It served so many purposes. Right? But philosophically, representatively, it was meant to guide the soul to the facts which we will come to in the next slides, which is that man is God. Temple represents physical man also. Even physical man is represented in the temple and the temple architecture. And certainly the Garbhagudi and the Murti is symbolic of man's inner divinity. Garbhagudi is the heart, right? Look at this, Pradakshina, right? He finishes Pradakshina and, goes to the Mantapam, Antarala, then Garbhagudi and sees the Murti, right? How beautifully the Navavida Bhakti, which Prahalada speaks of in Bhagavata, the different stages of bhakti are also represented in this circumambulation, entering the Mantapam, Antarala and Garbhagudi. The shloka says of Navavida Bhakti, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnuswaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam. These are the 9 mistranslated as 9 modes of bhakti. They seem to be 9 steps of bhakti actually, right? Look at this. Pradakshina is where you are not seeing the deity. You don't see the deity still because you are still in the outer prakaram. So you can only hear what is happening in the temple, Shravanam. What is being discussed in the sanctum sanctorum, the mantras being pronounced, you can only Shravanam, hear it. By Shravanam, you can repeat that. Kirtanam. After your ears have worked, your mouth also has to work. So you Kirtanam. You start pronouncing it. I mean, draw analogy between this and how the soul has to gradually progress. Right? It begins to hear first of good things, of the right philosophy. Then it begins to speak of it. Speak of it in the sense, it begins to repeat it. Right? Repeat it. Then you begin to remember. The right philosophy leads you to remember Smaranam. That, okay, divinity, my life is not, personal life is not the end and all. The personal life is a temporary efflux sent by the God within. We are that. We begin with Shravanam. Smaranam. You begin to Vishnu Smaranam. Begin to remember. Then you enter Mantapam. Right? You enter the Mantapam. Mantapam is where you are still engaged with the world, but sattvically you are engaging with the activities of the world. Therefore, all the Kalyana takes place, Munji takes place, Brahmopadesham, all these takes place in the Mantapam, right? That is where you do Pada Sevanam and Archanam, because Mantapam is, so to say, at the feet of the temple. Pada Sevanam, right? You begin there. You from merely sensual life, personal life, you have begun to sense that there is a greater object of worship for this personal self, which is the impersonal self, Archanam. I mean, this is this student's understanding, not that this is to be taken as some kind of this thing. And from Mantapam, there are terrible Dwarapalakas. They hold you accountable unless you have qualifications necessary to ethical qualifications necessary to go beyond Mantapam and enter Antarala or Ardhamantapam. You are not allowed. I mean, today we just barge into the temple, go and put our petition there. That's different. But look at the symbolism, how it ought to be. That's why the Dwarapalakas are stationed there. Terrible looking, fierce looking, ferocious creatures, right? Monstrous. So they hold you accountable. Only if you have the ethical qualifications, then you are allowed inside. Then you enter Antarala, Vandanam, Dasyam. Then entering Garbhagudi, look at how Garbhagudi is constructed. There is no other light that enters into Garbhagudi. There are no windows, there are no other doors than a small opening. The opening of Garbhagudi is also slightly lower actually. It's not as big as the other entrances of the temple. Hardly anything to see the deity, right? No window opening, no other place for air to come in. This reminds of the verse in Voice of the Silence that, such must be the fane that no earthly light can enter into the temple, right? So in the Garbhagudi, no earthly light can enter. It's there in our heart. That Garbhagudi is there in our heart, right? So no artificial light, nothing. And you see that gradually from more and more distractions to less and less distractions, from Mantapam to Ardhamantapam. In Ardhamantapam, there are no other.
And the perpetual lamp burning inside is flame of Prajna.
Flame of Prajna.
Radiating from Atma.
Radiating from Atma. Beautiful. See, I never thought of that. Beautiful. So less and less distractions, more and more focus on the Murti, right? That's how the temple is designed, right? And only the priest is allowed. Today, the priest has become something else, but only one who has become complete Sakyam, a friend of the divine, he is allowed into the Garbhagudi, right? And that's where you find Murti. Now, the Murti is not the God. This is very clear. Murti is not the God. Murti means an embodiment. There is a verse which this student came across in one of the Upanishads where it is said, time is indefinable. Therefore, an year is a Murti of the time. Or we can say a day is a Murti of time. It is an embodiment of time. So, using certain iconographical symbolism, you try to represent a portion of the Nirguna through Saguna, Nirakara through Sakara. Right? That is Murti. Every part of that Murti ought to draw the attention of the devotee to some aspect of the Supreme. That is what Murti is. That is why in the construction of the temple, it seems, there is always a small hollow opening left either below the Murti or above the Murti, representing Purusha. The spirit is not Murti, he is Nirguna, but represented through the idol, whatever be the idol, Shiva, Vishnu, Ganesha, whatever be the idol. Right? And reaching that is the final stage of Bhakti, Atmanivedan. You realize that the personal self is a complete object for surrender to the divine self. who is situated in the heart of all, like we read in the Gita. Right? So this from Saguna, or let's say from Durguna to Saguna, from Sarguna to Nirguna. This kind of journey is to be found in study of the temple. And look at the beautiful way in which temples have been constructed. I couldn't find that image. I came across it once, but I could never come across it again, where a certain Shiva temple is constructed and arranged in such a way to represent the 5 koshas. Outermost being Annamaya kosha, inner being constructed in such a way to represent Pranamaya kosha, then Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, Anandamaya kosha. In the center is the Shiva's linga. Beautiful representation, right? And the Panchabhutas. Not only is one temple representing so much, across geography, you find they have planned in such a way, these wise ones. Across geography, you find, representation of, for example, the Panchabhutas. Look at this. There is this tradition called as Panchalingas. Earthlinga, Prithvilinga is in Ekambareshwara, Kanchi. Apaslinga, water, is Jambukeshwara temple, Tiruvannai Kaval, right? And there is mythology associated with it. Sthala Purana, for example, in this water lingam, it is said that once in Kailasa, Parvati laughs at Shiva's intense anxiety, so to say, or effort to do welfare to his devotee. She laughs at him and Shiva curses her. Now you go to this temple, this place on earth, and do penance so that you expiate your sin, and then only you can come back. And she goes there, and that place is this Tiruvannai Kaval. And there she constructs a temple made of water. She constructs a lingam made of water. That's the Sthala Purana. Therefore, it is called as Apaslingam. Beautiful stories, but so much philosophy in it. Vayulingam, Srikalahasti. Agnilingam, Annamalayar temple. And this beautiful, most captivating, most attractive temple to this student, at least, is probably this Thillai Nataraja temple, Chidambaram temple. There is so much in it that it is just that one temple will probably take more knowledge in it than many libraries. Many libraries will not be able to exhaust the architectural sensitivity and spiritual significance which has been stuffed in every corner of the temple. As if you might miss out something. Every inch of the temple you would use it to represent something sacred and significant, right? That is called Akashalingam, right? Chidambaram. We will consider this. We will consider something about pilgrimage, the beauty of pilgrimage itself as a what it represents, right? And then we will stop. Chidambaram, just one or two things about it. 9 entrances. Krishna speaks of 9 entrances. Navadvaras of this body. The body has 9 openings. It's what shall we say? It's one of the gopurams is made of 21,600 gold sheets, which have been fixed in place through 72,000 nails. 21,600 is the number of breaths that a common man takes. They say it is close to 22,000. This representation of 21,600 is the breaths that a common man takes in a 24-hour cycle. 72,000 nadis in the body. So even a single nail to be affixed, they have used symbolism there. Right? There are 5 sabhas. Nritya sabha, where all the dance and things happen. And probably some kind of a social gathering. And there are other sabhas, 2 of them very interesting. Chit sabha. Chit sabha itself is such a beautiful name. Chit sabha and Chidambaram. Right? Chit ambaram. Ambaram is akasha, right? Ambaram is also clothed. Clothed in wisdom, chit. Clothed in consciousness. Or consciousness which is as big as sky, which is limitless consciousness. Right? There is a Chit Sabha. There are 5 silver steps which you have to mount to reach Chit Sabha. And they say it is Namah Shivaya. Or probably even the 5 koshas, because you have to cross the 5 koshas to reach the root of Chit, Prajna. And the deity there installed is Saguna, which is, there is a Nataraja there. And Nataraja is doing Tandava. Tandava is destructive, actually. There are various 108 basic forms, dance positions. Tandava is destructive. He is in destructive position because the personal self has to be destroyed. And just as in the human anatomy, the heart is slightly to the left of the body, Nataraja is placed slightly to the left, not in the center. So he is in Tandava, which is, he's in the annihilatory mode. Personal consciousness has to be annihilated. And from Chit Sabha, you reach Kanaka Sabha, which is Golden Sabha. There a beautiful ceremony takes place, which is called Chidambara Rahasya. In Kannada and probably in other language also, Chidambara Rahasya is a colloquial term to say that, you just don't know what happened, or you just don't know how to explain this. So, well, Chidambara Rahasya, I don't know what happened. Inexplicable phenomena, right? And the ritual is this. You're outside the Kanaka Sabha. There is a dark curtain, and the priest, at certain points of the day after the puja, he draws the curtain. You expect to find something there, but the room is empty. Nirguna. Deity is Nirguna. In the heart also, that Nirguna is present. All that you can see in that is outer dark, inner brightish red, and somewhere on that side of the wall, vaguely you can see one chakra. That's all. Bilva leaves are used to decorate the chakra. So there are so many interpretations. So since nobody knows what it is, it's called Chidambara Rahasya. As students of theosophy, what we can understand is Tandava is where the Chit Sabha, he has annihilated the personality. Then comes Kanaka Sabha, the golden womb, where the Nirguna is.
The 6 are slain and the master's feet are laid.
Beautiful. When the 6 are slain and the master's feet are laid, then does the pupil become the one, merge in the one, and lives therein. Right? So, yeah. So that is Chidambara Rahasya. Pilgrimage, right? We have few minutes, few more minutes, 5 minutes, then we will stop. Right? There is this very popular belief among Hindus that there are 7 places which, when visited, grant you moksham. Right? And the shloka, very famous shloka, is this. I will read it. Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika. Now, these are some of the places. Ayodhya we know, Mathura we know, Maya is Haridwar, Mayavati, Haridwar, Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika. Avantika is Ujjain, right? Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, Kashi, Kanchi, Avantika. Puri, this is not Puri. Puri means the cities. Puri, Dwaravati, that is Dwaraka. Puri, Dwaravati, Chaiva, Saptaite, Mokshadaya Kaha. That is, these are the 7 places which, when visited, grant you moksham. Now, you may say, what have we reduced it to? You be the worst kind of person, but you go on this pilgrimage with all your, fancy comforts and airplane tickets and helicopter rides. You visit them, then you are expiated of all the sins. You will reach moksha, right? That's the way the populace believes it. But don't be disparaging of that belief. Of course, we should try to remove that ignorance and give the correct understanding of it. That is our duty. But how this belief contains such profound truths is explained in one of the letters which a student of occultism wrote to T. Subbarao, and he takes this instance. That student of occultism is not named, and he quotes one great mystic called Satya Gnanananda Tirtha. Satya Gnanananda Tirtha. Don't search for him because his books are not available. I've done it. You don't know where that person is quoted from. He has written so much about occult symbolism, portions of which is quoted by this student of occultism who is unnamed, right? That person says that all places of pilgrimage has 3 aspects. There is a Jada aspect, there is a Shuddha aspect, there is a Nirvishesha aspect. Right? Jada aspect is what we see as, for example, Varanasi, Kashi. We go to the place and think that we die there, especially in Uttarayana, then we are going to go to heaven. So people go and stay there, waiting for their death, thinking that it will purge them of all the sins in them, take them to moksham, right? But he says that's only a jada. The actual Kashi is something else, he says. Actual Kashi and what it represents, especially in the context of this shloka, is something else. Look at this. He says, what is Kashi called as? Kashika, the shining one. Avimukta, never forsaken by Shiva. Ananda Kanana, forest of bliss. Rudravasa, place where Rudra resides. We have already figured out, students of theosophy, what Kashi represents, right? And mind you, this is the 4th in the link, right? Ayodhya, Mathura, Maya, Kashi. The student of occultism, quoting that other mystic, says, of the 7 centers in the body, the 4th is this heart. This is where Kashi is. How he proves it? Take the Sankalpa Shloka of Kashi. I didn't find the Sankalpa Shloka, but the meaning is this. It says that Kashi is that place between Varuna and Asi rivers. Therefore, it's called Varanasi. Varuna and Asi. Right? Kashi is that place which is situated between Varuna and Asi. It is situated in Anandavana. It is Mahashmashana. It faces Gauri, Gauri Mukham. It is held up by the 3 points of the trident of Shiva. And it is Manikarnika or Pranavakarnika at the end of Mani. This is the Sankalpa Shloka for Kashi. Right? Now see how it corresponds to the heart, the center, heart center in the human body. Right? Varuna and Asi are Ida and Pingala. Anandavana, the state of ecstasy, when the consciousness is centered in the heart, the state of ecstasy, right? Mahasmashanam, because like Shiva in Chidambaram did Thandava, destroyed the personality, then the Nirguna is revealed. So in the human being, there is Mahasmashanam, where personality is destroyed, and Pandit Bhavani Shankar says the individual has begun to merge into the universal self. So that's why Shiva is represented as being in the cremation ground. He is wearing ashes all around him. So he has destroyed the personal self. Gauri Mukham, Gauri is the shining one, Sophia, Isis. Held up by the 3 points of the trident of Shiva. 3 states of consciousness destroyed in the 4th. So when he has reached that state, he has reached Kashi. Right? Therefore he has got mukti, not because he is dying in Varanasi location. Midst of Brahmanalam going northward, Shushumna Nadi. It seems it is situated in Sushumna, that center in the heart. Manikarnika is the dot in the Pranava. So like this, that student is quoting this mystic and says that like this, every small thing is meaningful for one who goes beyond the jada and takes Shuddha. Shuddha aspect is where the spirit is beginning to be recognized, but still formed through symbols, formed through material conceptions and so on. Nirvishesha is when he has actually realized it.
Vishesha means
particulars,
only
oh, beautiful, yeah, see, particulars are removed, the universals remain, right? Similarly, there is Buddhist Ketumati. In Buddhist symbolism, Kashi is called as Ketumati, and they say that, in a long ages when Maitreyi Buddha comes, Kashi would have become Ketumati, and in Ketumati they describe there are 7 walls made of 7 jewels, there are 7 ponds, there are 7 kinds of trees, and there is a dragon situated there, and the people are all very happy always. There is no question of night. Hyperborean, no night. Hyperborean, no winter, right? Then there is always light. Everybody is always happy. Then there is a peculiar dragon there. The dragon today, it says, the Buddhist mythology, today the dragon every day is covered with dust. Therefore, in the night, he comes and takes bath here. But when Ketumati is realized, he is always pure. He doesn't need to take bath. He is always bathed in that purity. Your divine ego in Shushupti is bathed and purified of the dust of this waking consciousness of the Prophet. Devachan and Shushupti. So when Ketumati is realized, which is Kashi, then the dragon need not take bath. He is always bathed in purity. I mean, like this, every smallest thing is a representation of something divine. Only if we take it symbolically and try to decipher the meaning. If we take the Jada aspect only, then a lot of problems. So we'll stop here. Man is the grandest temple. There are so many verses which come to it. Probably we can take it up in some other time. So we'll stop here. Any few thoughts? Half a minute. Any thoughts? Otherwise, we'll stop. So this is how man is seen. The temple architecture represents the different parts of man, different centers in man. Yeah, right. So we'll stop here, and thank you for bearing this long lecture. And next Sunday, in the context of Deepavali, Festival of Lights, the topic is Lead Kindly Light. It's a beautiful poem, Lead Kindly Light. In Kannada, we had this by B.M. Sri, Karunadu Babelake. So that is the topic of next Sunday's lecture. So thank you. Thank you very much. We'll stop. Huh. Yeah, some 3 or 4 of them in the same latitude, longitude. Yeah, same longitude. Yeah. So that itself is a different. That I didn't even want to go there because so many things are aligned to equinox in Padmanabha temple in certain days. The light falls on all the 5. So as if the light is falling through the Panchakoshas. So many things. What to cover? So like the cat in front of a ocean of milk, take a few sips and go. So thank you, friends. Thank you.